Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to our visitors edition of the show for Minnesota Week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. It's been a few years, but this weekend the Gophers and Wolverines will once again do battle for the Little Brown Jug. Joining us to discuss that and more will be the radio play-by-play voice of Minnesota football, Mike Grimm. We'll also hear a few cuts from Sharon's Monday presser. I have to admit that Saturday I was transported back in time to the 70s watching this Michigan offense. I didn't think we let Orgy throw the ball around too much, but 12 times for 32 yards? As much as I enjoyed the ground and pound attack, I know and you know we have to find a way to get something going in the passing game. If we don't, there are too many good teams left on the schedule, and they will force us to air it out more. That said, I'll take a win over the number 11 team in the country any day. It was a great victory, and as any coach will tell you, it's easier to fix mistakes after a win. At his Monday presser, Sharon said Alex will once again get the nod this Saturday.
Alex will be the starter again, and there's definitely more to his game and more things that we have complimented for him and for the offense. But I thought he did a good job, took care of the football for us, which was the number one thing we wanted, and was a great team player. Did all the things we asked him, ran extremely hard when he asked him to. So proud of him and proud of his performance.
He said the offensive line played well and really is improving.
That defense is pretty good. 290 yards on the ground. I think we averaged like 6 yards a carry. So O-line definitely played their best game for sure. I think they averaged like 3 yards a run before contact, which is pretty good. So if you're blocking for 3 yards, it means you're probably going to get 4 or 5. And with Khalil back there, maybe 8. And Donovan averaged 5. So it's not like Donovan averaged 5 yards a carry on 14 carries. So thought those guys played well up front, always looking to improve. It's not a finished product, but they are getting better, and that's the biggest thing you look for.
A lot of us are worried about the play of young redshirt freshman tackle Evan Link, but Sharon said he's getting better each week too.
Yeah, steadily getting better. A young guy that's never started a game here and really never played that much. Last year he redshirted, so he played 4 games and that was it. And continually getting better. Last week he got better. You saw the steps going forward. So the size, the talent that he has, he just needs to continue to keep that confidence going, and he will.
Sharon shared his thoughts on this week's opponent, Minnesota.
Coach Fleck has a tough, physical, disciplined football team that they're going to play together. They're going to play team ball. They're going to play ball control offense. They're going to play smart defense. They're going to try to control the clock, do things to make you make mistakes. So we got to go out there and execute at a high level.
Minnesota went into halftime on Saturday with a 14-7 lead over Iowa, then gave up over 200 yards rushing to the Hawkeyes in the second half. My guest today says if they don't fix some things, it will be a long day in the big house for the Gophers. Up next is Mike Grimm, the radio play-by-play voice of Minnesota football. So stay with us. With us on our Visitors Edition today as we get ready for a big matchup for the Little Brown Jug in the Big House on Saturday is the radio play-by-play voice of the Golden Gophers, Mike Grimm. Great to have you back again, Mike.
Yeah, great to be back. Always enjoy coming on. And this is such a good rivalry, albeit Michigan, has controlled the rivalry over the course of history. Minnesota fans certainly look forward to playing the Wolverines when they get a chance. And, with realignment and everything else, it hasn't been every year. So when we get the opportunity to see the Gophers and the Wolverines, I think it's good for everybody.
It's always fun. And let's talk a little bit about this team we're going to see on Saturday, Mike. The Gophers opened Big Ten play on Saturday night at home, losing to Iowa 31-14. The Hawkeyes had a huge night on the ground against that Gopher defense, didn't they?
Yeah, and it was almost all in the second half. I mean, Minnesota was cruising in control of that game at halftime. They had two really long drives, probably their best two drives of the season in the second quarter against that really good Iowa defense, and went into the locker room leading 14-7. And the tenor in the building, since it was a home game, was really good. Gopher fans were feeling great. The radio announcer was not feeling that great because I had watched and seen Iowa, for whatever reason, each of their first three games. They kind of had a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, if that's the right term for it, where in each of those first three games they played one really bummer of a half and one really outstanding half. And having watched them play a bummer of a half in the first half on Saturday, I was very fearful. In fact, it's the first thing I said as the third quarter started to my color commentator, Daryl Thompson. The scary part is if Iowa holds to form, they're going to have a really good half. And so the Gophers got to be ready. And Iowa drove it right down the field. And it was like 3 minutes later, they tied the game. And they never took the foot off the pedal, and it was a whitewash, 24-0 in the second half. And I did not see it. I mean, I thought it'd be a good competitive game, even if Iowa played well, but they played so well. And as someone who follows that program, since it's the neighbor, and I grew up in Iowa for that matter, but you play them every year. You've been in that division. That's one of the best halves I've ever seen them play. And they've had good teams, right? And that's one of the best halves I've seen them play in a while.
Well, it was an interesting game, tale of two halves, no doubt about it. One of the things I was enjoying was watching Max Brosmer, 22 of 37 Saturday night, 2 TDs, 2 picks though. He came to Minnesota this year from FCS New Hampshire. He was a prolific passer there. So through 4 games in the season, how would you assess his impact on that Gopher offense?
I think it's a tremendous impact in the sense that they have really changed the way they are calling plays. They threw the ball a lot Saturday in that game, and it wasn't just because they got down. That game, in the first half, and then even through much of the third quarter, it's still a 1-touchdown game, and they continued. PJ Fleck's MO has been a real good, strong running game, hand the ball off, even if the running game's not going. And they really never committed to the running game. They were throwing the ball from the opening kickoff. And I think part of that is because they have some confidence in this kid. I'd give him a really solid B. I'm not sure, the first interception was his deal. I think his running back, he was planning on the running back to kind of squat in the zone, so he threw it to that spot, and the running back kept running. And as Iowa does, they have their guys in the right spot, and so they got an interception on that pass. And that said, much like the game, Max Brosmer was very good in the first half. As we mentioned, he engineered those 2 drives in the second quarter that put Minnesota ahead, and could not sustain anything in the second half. Minnesota, I don't have the stat sheet in front of me. I forget how many first downs they had in the second half. I remember distinctly those late in the third quarter saying they have just 1 first down in this quarter. They had a couple of 3-and-outs, and they had nothing going. So in addition to the defense giving up all these rushing yards in the second half, the offense didn't help them by keeping Iowa's rush game off the field. So it was a really so I would say much like the game, Brosmer was really sharp in the first half, and then they couldn't get anything going in the second half offensively.
Yeah, I have to say what surprised me was watching the Gophers throw 37 times. I mean, I never saw that coming. When you look at all of the preseason magazines and just think about Minnesota football and PJ Fleck, you're thinking, hey, this is a team that knows its identity. It wants to run the football. And yes, they've added Brosmer, who is a prolific passer. But Minnesota seemed to know who they were while other teams are searching for their identities on offense like Michigan. You've got a young talent like Darius Taylor to hand off to, leading the way, had a big freshman season. He's a local kid from Detroit. How has he run so far?
Yeah, pretty good. And it's an interesting thing because much of the last 2 years there's been criticism of of the Gopher coaching staff, including PJ Fleck, that they run the ball too much. Outside of the service academies, they run the ball the most.
Yeah.
And look, when you go 9-4, which is a pretty good year for Minnesota, there's not a lot of complaints. But as they did last year, and they went 5 6. Yeah, it was 5-7 in the regular season. You got the bowl bid up in Detroit because of the academic standing. So you finish with a bowl game, but you're under 500, then criticism comes out. Too much running, not enough explosive plays. They go get the quarterback they want. And so I thought it was a natural progression to shift a little bit. They had 4 returning starters on the offensive line. They have since replaced one of those starters because he just hasn't played very well. So now they have 3 returning starters, including a guy who if he finishes the season strong, has a chance to be a first or second round pick. But, I don't know how much you trust some of the Pro Football Focus stuff and some of those rankings. He hasn't played very well, or he hasn't played up to the standard he did last year, and they just haven't rushed the ball. Their yards per gain on the ground is under 4, and it's even skewed a little worse than that if you really take it into account. Darius had a 80-yard touchdown run in that Nevada game, so 80 of those yards on the season came on one handoff. So let's say you just eliminate that for the, you can't, but let's say you do because he broke 2 great tackles. It wasn't particularly blocked great, and then he used his skill to break away. But the number, of course, even is smaller than that. So it's a bit of a mystery. And it's weird because Gopher fans, after, basically 12 full months of complaining there's too much handing off after Saturday, are like, where's the running game? Why aren't they handing the ball off? So it's a conundrum, and they've got to figure out a balance there. And I suppose this is a searching process. The thing they've got to try to do is understand in this new alignment with harder schedules, no divisions, all this stuff, to me, and I think everyone's got to understand this, in a 12-team playoff, there will be a different look. There'll be, the seasons that might have been considered 3 years ago just okay, 7-5, even 8-4. In the new age, that can be a pretty good season at some spots in the Big Ten, maybe including Minnesota, and 9-3. And even 10-2, where there are higher expectations of Michigan, Ohio State, can get you in the playoffs. So we all got to kind of take a secondary look at, what does this new life mean? And so, there's still certainly an opportunity for Minnesota. They've got some marquee opportunities for benchmark wins. They've got Michigan, they've got Penn State, they've got Wisconsin. They play for a trophy in all those games yet, So, and then they got these coin toss games in the middle, Maryland, Rutgers, Illinois. And so it should be an interesting season. What they can't do, I think, is let Saturday's performance leak in and impact them this Saturday. Last Saturday can't impact this Saturday because, on paper, you're staring 2-4 in the face now because you're at Michigan if you're Minnesota this week, and then you host USC the next week. The Trojans will likely be favored on the road, and then you're, heading into October not feeling great. So these next 2 weeks, if they could somehow figure out a way to wiggle a win out of it, would be important.
Yeah, you're right. They have to forget about especially that second half performance against the run on Saturday. And I know statistics can be deceiving, but when you look at this Gopher defense on paper, they're only allowing around 117 yards per game on the ground. That's factoring in the Iowa game, and only about 100 yards passing per game. So this defense, other than that second half Saturday, has been pretty stout, hasn't it?
Yeah, that was what was head-scratching about it. And look, Iowa's good, and their running back is really a tremendous talent. I think that kid will play, in the NFL, it looks like to me, and he has taken a step from, he was good before, but now he is, really good, and he's strong, and he's fast, and he's got a unique style that I think it's one of those deals that it catches those guys off guard. He's a big kid, and I think all of a sudden he's on you quicker than you think. And Minnesota, I think, struggled with that. There was so much, they weren't even missed tackles, they just weren't in the right spot, and Minnesota has not had that issue for a while. There was a lot of green space for that kid to run. So I'm sure there'll be corrections. I'm sure nobody's happy in that Minnesota football building right now. And you're right, they can't let that worry. They got to make those corrections and hope that, look, I mean, they're an underdog, a double-digit underdog. I'm not trying to proclaim that Minnesota's going to come in and upset Michigan. That hasn't happened very often. But you also, if you're Minnesota, have to go in thinking that We've corrected things. And let's face it, it is a little bit of a different Michigan team. I don't think it's probably as good as the one that won the national title. So you're a 10-point underdog, and you got to go in with the attitude of let's go surprise them. Let's see what we can do. You stay in it into the fourth quarter and, hope you get some luck and maybe pull off a stunner. And that's got to be the way they look at it, I think.
Mike, I think this Saturday the Gophers really have to feel good about their shot in the game because Michigan, for all of us that follow Michigan, it clearly has issues on the offensive side of the ball. And on a game-by-game basis, we really don't know what we're going to see. So in many ways, this could be a dogfight on Saturday, I think.
Yeah, I think that's what Minnesota's got to hope. Like I said, is they keep it close. And you're right, to go back to your previous question in terms of what Minnesota's done stopping people. Now, look, it hasn't been a murderer's row, but they had back-to-back shutouts prior to that Iowa game.
Yeah.
And they hadn't given up a touchdown since the opener. And, and then just one touchdown in the first half. So that was a long stretch. That was just one touchdown over the course of about 10 or 12 quarters of football. And again, it's Rhode Island and Nevada, not murderer's row, but I don't care who you're playing, varsity versus JV, whatever, you're shutting people out, for 12 straight quarter, shut them out for 8 straight quarters, but only one touchdown over the course of a 12-quarter stretch at any point. That's impressive. So that kind of trapdoor falling out on them in that second half, certainly was a wake-up call, I would think. And you're right. If they get back to being in the right spot and form tackling and do those things, like I said, this probably isn't the Michigan team of a year ago. So maybe you keep them close. Maybe you take advantage of some struggles offensively there, and you get into the fourth quarter. I think that's got to be their mindset. Let's get to the fourth quarter and be within 7, or if you got the lead, even better, whatever. Get through 3 quarters and then try to bear down in that fourth to surprise somebody.
Well, Mike, we old Big Ten guys still think of this game as the battle for the Little Brown Jug. I know it's changed and will change with the way the schedule is going to roll out in the future, but I remember our famous play-by-play guy, Bob Buford, he used to say this game was for the most coveted piece of crockery in all of sports. and again, it might not mean what it used to, but the history of why we play for this old jug is worth repeating and remembering, isn't it, Mike?
Every year that it happens, and even in the years it doesn't happen, we should, re-educate folks on it. 1903, right, and just kind of a fun little rivalry. And I think at the time a little testy is how this all started back then. So good, right? That's what college sports is, what makes it fun. The problem, if it's a problem with this rivalry, is that Michigan's just been so much better over the years. I mean, Minnesota. Looking this morning, and I knew this, but sometimes you go week to week, as we all are week to week, right? And I'm looking. Minnesota hasn't, and I know this game is in Ann Arbor, but Minnesota hasn't beaten Michigan in Minneapolis since 1977. I was 7. I probably was 6 years old. I'm 54 now. So, I mean, that's how is it really a rivalry, right? So Minnesota, even the last time they've won overall was that game in 2014. Which I think if you really dive into it, and not to bring up memories, but if people remember that 2014 game, that probably was the beginning of the end for Brady Hoke, right? There were some things going on in that game, and Minnesota won big with Jerry Kill as the coach 10 years ago, and Minnesota hasn't won since. Now, they haven't played every year. We haven't been to Michigan, and I say we only because we travel with the team, and I actually do go. I don't mean I'm part of the team, but we haven't been up there to do a game since 2017, PJ Fleck's first year. If I'm looking at this right, and he's in year 8 now, so there's been a couple of games in between here in Minneapolis, and so it just doesn't get played as much, and Michigan has controlled it so much. I do think it gets lost in the shuffle. But when you look at the tradition and why this Little Brown Jug started, and it is the oldest, right? There's no documented trophy that's older than this one. It really in any sport, I don't think, but college football for sure. So when you're playing for the oldest trophy in college football, that should mean something Saturday for sure.
Well, PJ Fleck, you mentioned he's 52-26 overall at Minnesota now in that 8th year. Is this a hot seat year, or does the fan base still have faith in PJ as a good fit there?
Yeah, it's funny. He has. I'm a big fan, so I'm not having him on close to the hot seat at this point personally. Minnesota's a hard job. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. It is pretty interesting. I think people around the country probably at times have a better view or a better philosophical look at it, maybe, and they say, "Man, PJ's doing a good job there." I talk to other announcers around the country or just fans, and they're like, "Yeah, you got a good one there." But locally, because there's frustration, you lose. He's 1-7 against Iowa. That does not help. He has made the Wisconsin rivalry closer. They're 3-3 over the last 6 years, and that makes a great rivalry, right? You're splitting games over the course of 6 years. Wisconsin's getting ticked off. Minnesota loves it, and it's evened out here in the last half decade. So that part of it's been good. But people do get frustrated, and like I said, there was this long push of, you got to throw more. It's an outdated offense, and so now they're throwing a little more, and then they didn't move much in the second half, so everyone's like, why weren't they handing the ball off? So, I think it's like everything. It ebbs and flows. I mean, you're looking at, even Iowa last week, right? You're looking at a guy like Kirk Ferentz. He's the dean of everybody now, 26 years. No current coach has been coaching longer as a head coach, and certainly not in the same school. Mac Brown, of course, has coached longer, but he took some time off, and he's been at several different schools. But at one school, you're looking at him as 26 years, and what he's accomplished has been pretty remarkable. He's going to probably get a couple more years in, and he's going to retire as the second winningest coach in Big Ten history. Think about that, And yet, over the course of those years, he's been on the hot seat 2 or 3 or 4 times, and I think you got to live with that and understand fans get frustrated, and and even with a year where they were 10-2 last year and won the Big Ten West, people were a little disgruntled with how little offense they had last year. So everybody has reason sometimes to not feel great about their coach, even if they win 10 games in Iowa, right? So I guess that's a long answer to how is PJ Fleck viewed. I think there are some people frustrated that he has only beaten Iowa once. I think when you come off a second half like we saw Saturday and it's recency bias, people are ticked off. But I promise you this, if somehow they manage to go up and shock everybody and win in Ann Arbor, then everyone's going to be saying, sign this guy to a lifetime deal. And that's how college sports is now, right? It just is that way.
Well, final question before we let you get away, Mike. This is it's a year of change like we've never seen before in the Big Ten and college football with expansion. Throw in the 12-team playoff, which you talked about earlier. Does part of you miss the good old days in the Big Ten, or are you excited for this new adventure in college football?
I'm torn, Mike. I really am. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Iowa, right? So I am in Big Ten country. I went to my first Big Ten football game as an 8-year-old in 1979 at Kinnick Stadium. Iowa lost to Arizona 5-3, and I was hooked. So, and then when a year later, Hayden Fry does the unbelievable and takes the Hawkeyes to the Rose Bowl. Yeah. And I'm like, this is the greatest thing I think I've ever seen. I'm 10 years old, and then Lute Olson takes him to the Final Four right around that same time, and I'm like, okay, I'm loving this. So the Rose Bowl to me is the pinnacle of everything. And Minnesota hasn't been there longer than any of the old school Big Ten teams, and every coach that's been hired here has said that's their goal. Well, that's off the table now, right? So I'm crushed by that. I really am. From a sports standpoint, obviously there's tragedies going on in the world, and so in relative terms, I'm crushed that the Minnesota fans will now never get a chance. It's been 1960, whatever it is, 62 since they've played there. That's a long time. And there was always hope, particularly when the Big Ten West was there, like, hey, there's an opportunity that you can get this, you can play in the Rose Bowl. They can, but it's going to be part of a playoff, and it just isn't going to be different. So that's over. So I'm crushed by that. That said, now that it's over, I look forward to, I'm embracing the idea of, well, first of all, we being Minnesota will play at UCLA on October 12th, so they will be playing in that stadium. And there's so many Gopher fans I've talked to that will be going to that game just because they want to be out there for that. And I don't mean this as a knock to anybody in any trip in the Big Ten, but quite frankly, I've been to West Lafayette enough. I've been to East Lansing enough. I've been to, I love Ann Arbor, but hey, if there's a trip to LA or Seattle or Eugene, Oregon, where I've been to a game in Seattle. I've been to a game we did a game against USC in 2011 out there. So been out there, but I've never been to Eugene. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. I can skip a trip to Champaign one year and head out west. And Mike, where I'm really looking forward to it is this February when there's 18 inches of snow here and the Gopher basketball team goes out to play at Poly Pavilion. So that I will welcome.
There's a lot to look forward to in basketball, football, really in all of the sports with the new expanded Big Ten. But it's going to be nice this Saturday that we renew a piece of history in the battle for the Little Brown Jug with a noon kickoff in Ann Arbor against the Golden Gophers. I'm looking forward to it. So Thank you to the radio play-by-play voice of the Golden Gophers, Mike Grimm, for joining us again this year. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, Mike, and we look forward to another visit.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to being up there. I want to say real quick, if you give me a second, I always love the trip there. The Michigan fans are always great, and the hospitality folks, the ushers, the security people at Michigan Stadium are the best. They're classy. They welcome you in. They walk you to your place. It's just awesome, and I'm just looking forward to coming out and seeing everybody again up there.
On Quick Hits today, no injury news from Sharon, so maybe later this week we'll get an update on the status of Colston Loveland and Will Johnson. On Thursday, we'll be back with Clayton Safey from the Wolverine on 3 on our Game Day show. We'll also hear what PJ Fleck has to say about Saturday's battle for the Little Brown Jug. And we'll check the weather for our noon kickoff and also have some fun Game Day facts. That does it for now. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until we meet again on Thursday, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!